So again, I just want to welcome everyone across the state who's attending our meeting this morning. Today's presentation is the fiscal guidance to support MTSS implementation. This is a representation of a collaboration between the department and also our stakeholders at Mtss for Michigan's Multi-Tier Systems of Support, your TA Center. So today we have Mr. Mark Fineweaver. We also have Stephen Curry from the MDE Fiscal Unit, and Mark is from Mtss. We have Elizabeth Newell representing MDE from the OSPI, Office of Strategic Planning. And we also have our two moderators of the chat, Ms. Sadie Mahone, who is our Title I Regional Consultant, and also Ms. Suzanne Grambush, who works alongside me in the Special Populations Unit. So welcome again. If you can put the district you're representing today and your role in the chat, that'll help us too. And remember, if you have any questions, you can kindly put them in the chat, or I don't know if we'll have time at the end to answer any questions. So today's objectives are for you to become familiar with the fiscal guidance for implementing a multi-tier system of support. And notice that David kindly also gave you a link to the Mtss fiscal guidance. We hope that you're able to peruse that document and kind of dive a little deeper into it at a later time with your admin and your BLT, your leadership teams. We want you to explore how Michigan school districts can coordinate and use the state and federal funds to support the implementation of an MTSS framework. Gain knowledge of how Michigan Integrated Continuous Improvement Process, or what we all know now as MICIP, to support the planning of your continuous improvement process, along with your MTSS implementation. Reflect on your practices in your LEA and PSA and how MDE's guidance may support your implementation. And the best part of us doing this presentation all over the state is we're gathering the feedback that is necessary for any revisions if we have to make any, and to inform our TA and guidance that we're providing to LEAs all across the state. Throughout today's presentation, we'll ask you to actively participate either during a poll. You'll have about 3 questions in the poll, and also in the chat with short answers, comments, or questions. So into the fiscal guidance for implementing MTSS. This is our first version. It was released in May of 2021. And the guidance provides school districts with guidance on how to coordinate the use of state and federal funds to support the implementation of an MTSS K-12. The document begins with a brief overview of MTSS as we define it in the state of Michigan, along with the practice profile and general methods for coordinating state and federal funds. It also describes how federal and state funds may be used to implement, with several example activities organized first by funding streams and then by the 5 essential components of MTSS. You will notice that we only showcase one narrative here because this is a pretty jam-packed presentation, but we want you to continue to delve further into the MyMTSS document itself, because there are a total of 3 narratives that you will have to review. And we took into account all the types of districts across the state of Michigan when they were developed. So each narrative is going to focus on the unique insights of how districts are implementing MTSS and illustrate how coordinated funds may be used to improve learner outcomes. So we have to give you a disclaimer. All of us who are seasoned federal and state program planners, you know that your legislation change, either your supplemental categoricals change sometimes annually, and also you have to watch for changes in federal legislation, which means that you do need to consult with your federal Title I consultant and also your supplemental category consultant to ensure the allowability, the allocability, and the necessity of the use of the funds. So these are generally allowable, some of them, but you need to really pay attention to the information in the documentation and also consult with your person. So let's delve into MTSS and the practice profile. The Michigan Department of Education multi-tier system of supports practice profile clearly defines the standards and expectations for what MTSS looks like in practice and provides guidance for implementation of MTSS as indicated in Michigan state law. It describes specifically what actions educators and leaders take when using an MTSS framework as intended. The tool identifies the 5 essential components of MTSS, as well as its underlying philosophy, expected outcomes, and research base. Currently in the field, school-wide fidelity measures exist that align with the MDE MTSS 5 essential components. Given the availability of fidelity measures at the school level and the need to define the role of the district, the practice profile was developed to specify the actions of a district implementation team in supporting effective and sustained use of the MTSS framework. So why should the district coordinate funds to support MTSS? Well, there is at least 25 to 30 years of great research that says that when implemented with fidelity and maintained, MTSS does work. So that's one great reason. The implementation of the essential components with fidelity provides educational settings with a framework to organize their strategies and their plans needed to eliminate barriers to learning and support successful learner outcomes. Most notably, being proactive in improving academic environments and outcomes for all students is another benefit of implementing MTSS, and also really getting down to working with the building leadership teams as well as your district leadership team to coordinate funds to maintain. Successful implementation of MTSS requires ongoing planning, continuous improvement, and the sustaining and scaling of efforts. So here's our first poll for today. You have 3 questions to answer. The first question is, how familiar are you with the MDE MTSS Practice Profile 5.0? So this is the 5th version, and it's 5 essential components. To what degree does your LEA use the MDE MTSS Practice Profile 5.0 to inform its practice? And how familiar are you with the fiscal guidance for implementing a multi-tier system of support? So we'd like to know more about your familiarity with the MDE practice profile and the MTSS fiscal guidance. So we're going to launch the brief poll, and here's your poll. So take a brief moment to go ahead and answer those questions.
Stephanie, the answers are coming in. I'll let you know when we get up to a good percentage.
Okay, thank you, David. We've got about 100 people participating today. Almost half of you have responded. We're waiting for a lot more. Very good.
Looks like we hit that magical 80-ish percent.
Come on, everybody. You might have went to go grab some coffee. Okay, so we've got about 80% of the people who have responded. And about 35% of you said that you are aware of the MTSS practice profile. But have not read the guidance.
Stephanie, would you like me to share the results?
Yes, please.
All right, they're shared out with everyone now.
Okay. And you have, for question number 2, we've got about 39% of you has said, I heard my colleagues within the LEA reference the practice profile, but I'm not sure to what degree it informs actual practice. And for question number 3, 44% of the people have said, I am aware of the fiscal guidance for implementing MTSS, but have not read the guidance. Some of you say today was your first introduction, and we understand that. We know you've been busy with pandemic planning. So about 24% of you have, this is the first day, and 10% of you have said you have read it. So good job for those 10%. We want to encourage you to please use the fiscal guidance as well as the practice profile to inform your reflections that go on within the LEA for MTSS. So we're going to go ahead and move on to methods for coordinating funds, which is going to be done by Stephen Curry.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm looking at the chat and I'm seeing a lot of folks who are state and federal programs, which is no surprise, business managers and fiscal leaders for districts. So many of you are going to find this section a bit of a review, but I think it is very valuable to revisit some of these pieces. And again, we always have guests that this is a first time or a beginning piece. So I just wanted to start off with that there before moving forward to this multiple funding streams slide, which would be the next slide. There we go. So as you can see, there are 3 major funding streams that we utilize, which is our general funds, which makes up our per pupil allocation, local taxes, philanthropic grants, and then of course we have our categorical funds from the state, 31A at risk, 35A literacy, and various others. And then of course we have our federal supplemental funds that are used, our Title 1s, 2s, 3s, 4, 5, IDEA, that whole list that goes there that we all utilize in order to run the various programs that we're offering in our school districts. So what we're going to talk about is braiding of funds here. You may have seen a chart similar to this and via MyKIP and some of the resources that are there. Basically, braiding funds is a way for the district to utilize multiple federal, state, and local funding sources to go ahead and support various parts of an initiative while maintaining their specific identity. So when we look at this chart, and we're going to go ahead and look from left to right, you're going to see that dark blue, which is your general funds or your foundation allowance. And this is a place where there's the most flexibility and where resource equity really begins. And then you're going to see right in the next to the right, which represents the very center of this diagram, is that light blue. Those are also general funds, but those are a little more restrictive as they're sinking funds, bond monies, philanthropic grants, and each of those items have various restrictions on them for use. And so, of course, that has impact on the planning and strategic planning of the use of those funds. If you go to the bottom left side, you're going to see state categorical funds. And those, again, are your various legislated funds from the state. And again, they're awarded for specific designed purposes that are outlined in law. Of course, we have 31A, which is state funding designated towards MTSS, K-12, reducing chronic absenteeism, improving 3rd grade reading, 8th grade mathematics, school-wide Tier 1 evidence-based practices, parent and community engagement, and obtaining supplemental staffing support such as qualified academic and behavioral interventionists. I mention that because we're going to talk a little bit about 31A today, and of course Stephanie and others are our 31A experts, so we appreciate them and their participation and assistance in this process. And then finally, in the orange, or red is the federal supplemental funds. And those are the dollars provided by the federal government allocated by MDE according to those established guidelines. They're made available upon approval of allowable activities and paid as a reimbursement of expenses incurred to districts. So again, most of you understand these concepts. However, it's important to have a good reminder as a foundation. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about some methods for doing that. So we'll start again with braiding funds. And of course, the braiding of funds is a strategy where the individual fund identity remains the same. The intent and purpose for each funding stream remains. And sometimes a district will find, actually often a district is going to find challenges funding whatever it is they're implementing. And so they're going to think through availability of funds, how much is there, all those pieces that you consider at the district. And if there are limits to those available funding streams for the desired allowable existing, there are other options such as transferring your title funds. And so this allows the LEA the flexibility to use funds in programs and activities that most effectively address their needs. So you can transfer Title II Part A and or Title IV Part A to other funding sources that the district receives. For programming purposes, these funds lose their original identity and take on the identity of the new fund source, subject to all the rules and conditions of that new source. So therefore, those funds must meet the intent and purpose of all the other applicable rules of the fund source that received that transfer. Again, many of you understand that. And of course, your regional consultants can assist with any questions that come with that. However, if in considering that and you're utilizing transfers and you're still finding some challenges in order to implement whatever it is that you're working on, if you have a school-wide Title I building, you may consider school-wide consolidation. So school-wide consolidation is also considered blending funds. And so this occurs when sources are combined under a set of single reporting and other requirements. As a result, the resources contributed from each individual funding stream loses the original award-specific identity. Blending can occur at a school-wide Title I building only through the process of Title I school-wide consolidation. This process allows blending of certain title funds, 31A at risk, general fund dollars. The specific fund identity is lost while the intent and purpose for each remains the same. And so if you're at a point where you're considering school-wide consolidation, it's strongly recommended that you reach out to your regional consultant. There are some forms to fill out and processes to walk through. So again, this is
transfer of title, they take on the new, but school-wide title consolidation, it does not. That's interesting.
So Janika, can you repeat what you just said? And if you have a question, please, or comment even, if you could go ahead and put that in the chat. This way we can carry that forward or continue that conversation and learn from each other on that as well. So thank you, I appreciate that. If we can go to the next slide. So here, this is from the fiscal guidance, part 2, pages 9 through 15. And then in part 3, that's found on pages 16 through 20 of the guidance document. Part 2 of the fiscal guidance for implementing MTSS provides examples of how various federal and state funds, such as IDEA, title, and state aid may be used to implement MTSS. Then part 3 of the fiscal guidance provides examples of how a district might coordinate funds to support implementation of the 5 essential components of MTSS. Also, just want to remember that the 21 regional spring planning workshops did go out, and of course those can be found on the state website, where you can view those again as well. So if we can move to the next slide, we're going to provide an opportunity in the chat to share some thoughts about examples of how your district utilizes multiple funding sources to support MTSS. So if you have an example of how you might fund a particular position, or a bigger scale, how you fund an implementation as it's related to MTSS, that would be very helpful to, one, your colleagues, and two, we will be sharing and we'll be saving the chat and utilizing that for research purposes. Additionally, what supports or information might be helpful as administration, building leadership teams consider additional opportunities to braid or blend their funding? So what supports would be beneficial to you and your teams to help in this process? So if you can put those thoughts in the chat, that would be greatly appreciated. So we have a question about the benefits of going with school-wide consolidation. Is it more flexible use of funds? So that's a great question. And Sadie responds by sharing that, yes, indeed, it does provide more flexibility. We have folks utilizing Title I and 31A to support MTSS. Multiple funding streams for SEL interventionists. Okay, we have some folks interested in learning more about transferring Title II funds to Title I. There are folks that use Title I and Title II general fund to 31A. There are folks that are using 31A and Title I to support literacy interventionists, and Title II to support instructional coaching. 31A coordinator and Title I for coaches and interventionists. Instructional and behavioral coaches. So we got a variety of things here, and I've made a note regarding additional information around transferring funds from Title II to Title I. And if in any of these cases you would like somebody to reach out to you, go ahead and put your contact information in there, and we'll gladly reach out following the presentation as well. With that, I believe that leads us to Liz.
Thank you, Stephen. Good morning, everyone. So as we think about how we fund MTSS, we're going to spend some time looking at the connections between Michigan's continuous improvement process, otherwise known as MyKIP, and how MyKIP and MTSS work together. So when we talk about MyKIP, we are referring to three broad areas. There's the mindset, there's a process, and there's a platform that really work together for continuous improvement. And we are not going to go into the details of the process and the platform today, but we really want to emphasize how the mindset and the process of MyKIP supports a district's implementation of MTSS. So the core of MyKIP, when we talk about MyKIP, we're referring to those three broad processes, but neither MTSS or continuous improvement are solo acts. As they work together, a key ingredient to success is collaboration. The first essential component of MTSS, as defined by the MTSS practice profile, is team-based leadership. MyKIP also refers to team-based leadership. So as teams at the district and building levels, they collaborate and communicate, and they can contribute to an aligned and cohesive education system. This alignment and cohesion of leadership creates a sustainable, scalable, and engaging school climate to support successful implementation of MTSS and learner achievement. So in one district, the MTSS team and continuous improvement team may be one and the same, whereas in another district, it may not. It's really all about fulfilling the needed functions within the unique context of your district. For both MTSS and continuous improvement, an interdisciplinary team is needed to assess needs, plan, implement, monitor, and evaluate. The MyKIP platform allows for all team members to stay up to date with the ongoing continuous improvement work. It's important to note that having various perspectives represented on the team does not necessarily mean having a different individual for each perspective, particularly in smaller districts where we know individuals can wear many hats and represent more than one perspective at a time. It also may not be practical to have all needed perspectives at meetings for a collective voice. So in this case, it's important to bring the various perspectives in at key times and or use a variety of engagement strategies such as focus groups or for surveys to gather input on needed improvements and strategies. Consistent collaborative dialogue amongst district leadership ensures the use of various funds aligns to the academic and non-academic goals established within the continuous improvement plan. While developing the plan, sometimes it's not about having the answer, but rather knowing the right questions to ask. So having diverse perspectives at the table throughout the improvement process increases the likelihood that the right questions will be asked to inform effective planning. So let's chat about what's happening in your districts. Take a minute just to reflect as an individual. Are those in charge of programming decisions and those in charge of fiscal planning at the table together throughout your LEA and PSA's planning process? And as you're thinking about that, feel free to respond in the chat and share an example of either successful collaboration between programming and fiscal staff or an opportunity you see to increase communication and collaboration. So what's happening in your district around this programming fiscal collaboration? Any good examples or opportunities you see to increase that? Quarterly fiscal and program planning meetings with specified topics has been helpful. Oh, great idea. We work side by side with business offices, with the business office, many conversations and regular meetings. Great to hear. Constant work with the business office with regular meetings. Our fiscal planning person is with our programming planning some of the time. However, we do need that person to attend more often. It's a good start though. This is definitely an area of growth for us. Sorry, I lost track. It was moving so fast. It's something that we have actively started implementing. For example, surveyed families about the use of ESSER funds. Oh, so good to hear. Opportunities to increase app collaboration. Have this be a part of what we do in an ongoing way. Stop having this be an event that occurs once a year. Oh, we can't celebrate that more than what you just said. with this whole idea of continuous improvement being an ongoing process and it's not a one-time year event, yes, coming together on a regular basis is so crucial. Our district is fairly small, so conversations between the two are very common. It's an added benefit, easier to come together sometimes in a smaller district. Work side by side with a business office. They're part of our federal and state funding meetings. Awesome. As the director of academic services, I meet weekly with my business director one-on-one, as well as additional meetings with building administrators and district administrators. Great. Monthly meetings with our MTSS team, including leaders from all departments and MTSS interventionists. We need to improve the collaboration by having our business office attend district school improvement meetings, especially as we discuss strategies and activities so we can ensure proper funding. Absolutely. Through our My MTSS implementation, we have a district leader that includes administration and teachers. Superintendent represents the fiscal component. Awesome. And the comments continue to move on. Oh, thank you so much. These are awesome suggestions and experiences that you're having working on bringing those pieces of programming and fiscal together. So a second reflection, has your LEA or PSA identified and implemented specific strategies to engage students, families, and community partners and other stakeholders in the continuous improvement process? Someone had mentioned earlier some surveys. Please share additional examples of successful stakeholder engagement or opportunities you see to increase your stakeholder engagement and continuous improvement. So reflecting on that stakeholder engagement. And often within education, we think of our students and families, but often really thinking about those community partners as well. Community partners that often we have come into the school, but also business partners and other partners that we may not always traditionally think of. Surveys, parent involvement nights, newsletters, parent contact weekly. Let me tell you, those parent contacts are so meaningful. I had the art teacher from the high school reach out to me about my student in a really positive way, or with my daughter, and it makes the world a difference. Inviting community partners to help us in areas we cannot. Oh, that's beautiful. This whole idea that we can leverage from each other and work together to meet common goals. Dave provided us a sample written process for how to collaborate between the business office and the program director. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm gonna click on that myself, Dave, so I can take a look at that. Surveys, the superintendent has scheduled meetings with students at each building, along with open parent meeting times in each building. Bringing students together. That's so powerful. That always comes to mind, that piece around nothing about us without us. And if we're there to really support the needs of students, how can we do it without having opportunities for them to share their voice? Oh, very good point. Stakeholder engagement doesn't have to be a meeting for MTSS, but rather having the MTSS members attend meetings with other teams, such as boosters and community organizations, and ask to get on their agendas. Great point. I really appreciate the idea of it's not always about people coming to us, but sometimes it's us going to them. Parent nights, absolutely. Parent advisory teams and meetings. Oh, these are some awesome examples. So feel free to keep reading through. We can go to the next slide, Mark. Thank you. So this slide highlights the initial steps within the MyKIP process designed to support districts as they identify needs. Within the MyMTSS fiscal guidance, as Stephanie referenced, there are 3 narratives that showcase diverse districts applying the continuous improvement process to identify needs, develop plans, and then fund those activities to support the implementation of MTSS. While the districts are fictitious, the narratives within the guidance have been developed using real data from across the state. They provide examples of how districts of different sizes might apply the continuous improvement process to assess their needs, develop those plans to address the needs, and then coordinate the funds to support implementation of the plan. And it's really valuable to read through all 3 of the narratives in the guidance because each one offers unique insights. Today, we're going to use the district narrative 1 within the guidance as our example to walk you through. So the district in this narrative represents a small district that consists of 721 students across 3 buildings. They're elementary, middle, and high. Across the 3 schools. And then those 3 schools are actually within 2 different buildings. The district serves 391 students who are economically disadvantaged, 88 students with IEPs, and 16 students who are English learners. And the district is focusing on implementing the behavioral components of an MTSS through PBIS, or Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, in grades K through 12. So their area of inquiry within MyKIP is non-academic, specifically focusing on school culture and climate. So within the MyKIP process, it begins with prompting districts to identify an area of inquiry, which we just mentioned is school culture and climate in this case, and engage in this process of data discovery. So in this example, the district analyzed multiple data objects to better understand their current successes and their current challenges associated with culture and climate, and specifically their PBIS implementation efforts. First, the district reviewed implementation fidelity data in the MyMTSS data system to determine whether critical features of PBIS were being implemented consistently by their staff. So for those of you that may be less familiar, the MyMTSS data system is a free web-based data system designed for LEAs and ISDs in Michigan to gather and analyze data that is critical for the continuous improvement of MTSS. And it allows districts to compile and house data such as MTSS training records, capacity assessments, fidelity assessments, and more. And at the end of the presentation, we have a link to the MyMTSS data system if your district is interested in signing up for its use. So in the review, this district discovered that only one of their 3 schools was implementing Tier 1 PBIS with fidelity, as measured by the PBIS Tiered Fidelity Inventory. And that all 3 buildings were struggling with the same core components of PBIS: the school leadership team development, correction procedures, and database problem solving. So then they moved on to look at data within their student-wide information system, or SWIS, which houses office discipline referral data. The data indicated that all 3 buildings had been above the national mean for office discipline referral rates within the past 2 years. And the elementary and high school had rates above the 75th percentile, with most of their discipline referrals coming from classrooms. Then looking at attendance, their attendance data from the district student information system indicated that chronic absenteeism continued to be an area of concern with minimal improvement from the previous year. Only 75% of the students were attending school for at least 90% of the time. So in the student subgroups with the highest absentee rate included students that were economically disadvantaged, students with IEPs, and students that were English learners. The only reduction in students that received suspensions or expulsions was actually at the middle school, which showed minimal growth toward their district goal of 10% or fewer students in any grade level receiving a suspension or expulsion. The perception data from the school climate survey that they conducted indicated that 30% or more of stakeholders, including staff, students, and families, perceive behavior and safety as areas of need. So really collectively looking at multiple data points, it really pointed to strengthen their implementation of PBIS at Tier 1. So following this data discovery and gap analysis, MyKit prompts districts to conduct a root cause analysis. So in this case, the team needed to better understand the root cause for why fidelity of Tier 1 PBIS was not as strong as the district had expected. So given the district's routine use of the district capacity assessment to evaluate its infrastructure to support MTSS implementation, the district elected to use the MTSS root cause analysis tool to identify contributing factors at the district level. Based on the results of the root cause analysis, the team determined that a district level factor likely contributing to the current data was that the district's coaching system needed strengthening to improve the implementation of PBIS before increased student outcomes could be expected. To provide clarity around the connection between the challenge they identified in the data and the identified root cause, the team created the following challenge statement. If the district strengthens its coaching system for PBIS, then improvements in Tier 1 scores on the school-wide PBIS tiered fidelity inventory across the schools should occur. Next slide, please. So in the previous year, the district had engaged in a selection process and identified PBIS as the district strategy to improve school culture and climate. And since the most recent data review highlighted continued concern about capacity, and the district was also implementing other initiatives to address social-emotional behavioral supports, the team reviewed the district inventory of initiatives. The team determined that implementation of PBIS remained a high priority, and additional work was warranted to ensure that district PBIS efforts and community-based partnership programs were well aligned. With a reconfirmed commitment to PBIS, the team moved into planning the activities necessary to strengthen the implementation of PBIS, specifically at Tier 1. So a goal was created to reflect the targets and the timeline the team wanted to see the improvements by. So by June of 2024, they wanted to see that all the schools were implementing MTSS for behavior, PBIS tiers 1 through 3 with fidelity, which meant a 70% total score on school-wide PBIS tiered fidelity inventory, and that office discipline referrals would decrease by 12% across the district. To help them achieve the goal, they identified interim targets for monitoring the district progress toward meeting the goal. The first interim target was that the district team would review the coaching system and clearly define coaching requirements in terms of roles and responsibilities, and more accurately allocate the time and frequency needed to coach to result in increased score of the district capacity assessment. So really they're striving that the district has a coaching system to support schools in the use of PBIS. And they really wanted to have that strengthened in this case by June of 2020. So thinking about this connection between continuous improvement, MyKIP, and MTSS, from this segment of the presentation, please share with us and share with your colleagues on the webinar today, what might be a new idea that you'll take back to your LEA or your PSA to support MTSS implementation through the MyKIP process, either through data discovery, gap analysis, root cause analysis, challenge statements, or goals with interim targets. Or an alternative would be to share a success that your LEA or PSA may already be having with embedding MTSS in your continuous improvement process. So please hop in and share your thoughts about these connections. Get caught up on the chat here while you're adding in. There's a question, is there a sandbox for the MyMTSS data system that we could preview? So as you know, within MyKIP, there's, well, let me back up for a minute. MyKIP and the MyMTSS data system are both housed and funded by MDE. And so over time, we are looking to have full data integration for that data to flow back and forth between the two systems. Currently, there is an option though to upload, download specific reports from MyMTSS that then you can upload into your MyKIP process to have that data for your review. Within the MyMTSS data system, there are different ways you can view data across your buildings for implementation and then collectively as a district. There are charts and graphs that are provided so that you can look kind of at longitudinal aspects. So it provides an opportunity to transfer that data in that way. Let's see, because we work with MyMTSS, our MyKIP plan is built using our MyMTSS district plan. Awesome. I like the, oh, I'm sorry.
I think it's the one, I did get one and she was, about what?
Reading, like testing.
I don't think so.
I have more of a question than anything to offer. Really wondering how people are embedding the MTSS with the new MyKIP when we're saying we only need one strategy. So obviously we'll move forward and add, I'm sorry, one goal, and we'll add all of those. So definitely interested in knowing how people are planning to move forward to include all of everything, your consolidated app, your MTSS plans within the broad new MyKIP platform. It was easier to say than type. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question. So there are a lot of different strategies. Our MTSS staff have been working very closely with MyKIP to develop some illustrations of how to do that well. Mark, maybe you could grab the link for the MyMTSS website that provides the MTSS and MyKIP resources that gives some examples of how to do that. If you wouldn't mind popping that in the chat, that would be great. Let's see, MTSS is one of the strategies we identified for our literacy goal within the MyKIP platform. We started with the DCA and MTSS practice profile to identify the goal and targets along with activities for the 5 essential components. We're working with our ISDs too. Awesome. We have an informational reading goal in our district. We have 4 strategies and one of them is MTSS implementation. Oh, so good to hear. Glad you guys are seeing those connections. And there are, as I mentioned, there are additional resources to support that MTSS MyKIP connection for planning. One last comment, knowing the importance of MTSS. This was our strategy for the district MyKIP plan. Our activities and goals are 100% tied to MTSS and improving what we do. Fabulous. Great. And Mark just popped in the chat there the link to some of the supports for the MyKIP platform. All right, and from there, speaking of Mark, I'm going to hand it over to Mark for our next portion.
All right, thank you, Liz. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you this morning. So before we get into discussing the specific activities, so we've kind of gone through the planning, setting goals. We're going to next move into activities. It's important that we discuss what are the components of a district implementation infrastructure to support this MTSS work. So whether you're implementing MTSS or you're implementing any other effective innovation, these are the core components that need to be in place to support that structure. So I just want to walk briefly through these components with you. You'll kind of see here the keystone of this illustration, which I think really represents a bridge. The keystone is having a district implementation team. You need to have that core team in place. And they have key actions that they are going to be doing. Mainly, they're going to be developing some key components and processes and procedures, which really are represented on the two wings of the bridge here. So they're going to be developing staff recruitment and selection processes. They're going to be developing a coaching system. They have a staff development process that they should have in place. They should develop a barrier removal process. So if barriers come up in the district, how can we address those barriers? There should be an initiative inventory and alignment process. And so we need to make sure that all the initiatives that are within our district are aligned, and there should be a process that the district goes through to do that. And then an initiative and innovation review process. So if there's a new initiative or innovation that is being considered, there should be a process that the team goes through to determine, hey, do we have the capacity? Do we have the resources to, in fact, utilize that initiative or innovation? And then you'll see here at the top of the bridge, every district team should have a key communication plan. Critical communication is to key stakeholders. So that's one of the key pieces that should be in place. There should be an implementation plan, which essentially is a roadmap for implementation, kind of guiding the team, tying back to larger goals and also key activities. And then at the central hub of this bridge is data analysis and use. And so making sure the team is in fact using data to make decisions. Oftentimes the data is going to tell us, hey, where do we have any gaps or holes in any aspect of this bridge that we need to improve? And it's just going to ultimately guide toward student outcomes. So you can kind of see here the key components of that implementation infrastructure that the district needs to have in place. So now that being said, that moves us into the district narrative and the activities that were developed as a part of this narrative. So the first two activities that the district we're going to address, you'll see here on the screen, under A, they're going to revise the school counselor job title, description, roles, and responsibilities to include the functions of a PBIS coach. And then the second area of coaching that they wanted to focus on, which you'll see under B, is that what they wanted to add 1 FTE to fund a programs coordinator that will hold the administrative duties previously assigned to the counselors across the 3 schools. So this program, or this programs coordinator, is going to be focusing on 3 different areas. The first area is the coordination of state and federal funds. The second area is coordination of the MTSS work. And then the third area is the coordination of the parent and family programs. So they wanted to use that FTE to cover all 3 of those specific areas within the district. One thing we wanted to clarify, so when we start to talk about coaches in the district, there's 2 distinct types of coaches that need to be clarified. So the first type of coach is an instructional coach. So oftentimes when you hear individuals in a school district talked about a coach, they're thinking instructional coach. And so an instructional coach more focuses on individual staff in a particular area by modeling and providing feedback on the use of instructional strategies and practices. So oftentimes an instructional coach will use data with individual teachers to help to guide a very specific practice within a classroom. And so you'll see here, sometimes a PBIS coach can serve as an instructional coach on a school leadership team to help in that manner, focusing very specifically on PBIS and supporting staff within the classroom environment. The systems coach, in contrast, is much more of a broad focus. So they're focused on guiding a district implementation team. Sometimes we call them district leadership teams. Also, a systems coach could be at the school level. So they could be supporting a school leadership team, or otherwise sometimes called a building leadership team. So the systems coach is focused on guiding these teams to successfully implement a proven practice. And so the school, at the school level, they might be supporting rolling out PBIS, for example. That's a proven research-based practice. At the district level, that coach may be supporting rolling out those core elements that you saw in the bridge, the district infrastructure elements, to support something like MTSS within the district. So what the systems level coach is going to do is they would be supporting, for example, teaming structures of a district team. They might co-facilitate analysis of data. They would help to ensure that all staff have ongoing professional development or access to professional development to support the rollout of a specific effective innovation. And so in the narrative, when we're talking about an MTSS coordinator, we are referencing this level of coaching, the systems level of coaching. And so hopefully you can understand the distinction between the systems level coach and the instructional coach. So what I want to share with you though next is very specifically, what is the role of a district MTSS coordinator? You may have heard that terminology, you see it in the narrative. So the primary role of the district MTSS coordinator is to facilitate and coach the district team. And so this slide here outlines more specifically what the responsibilities would be for the district MTSS coordinator. So as I mentioned, they're facilitating the team. Specifically, the team should be meeting regularly. Oftentimes we encourage monthly. There also should be in constant communication with the executive leader. We know that the executive leader carries key decision-making. They can address barriers. They can address accessing resources. And so there needs to be key communication to that leader. The district coordinator also helps to draft district processes and procedures to present to the team for feedback. And so we look back at that bridge component. There's those core components. That coordinator helps to draft those, as well as ensuring that the team is getting those components in place. They would help to monitor and prompt the use of those processes and procedures. So for example, the use of an implementation plan, they're going to be monitoring, are we using it? Are we moving forward toward our goals? And also the use of a communication plan, making sure that we're communicating to key stakeholders. The other piece is they help to facilitate the use of district data, you know, that we often gather lots of great data, but this coordinator helps to ensure that are we using that data to make informed decisions. And then in some instances, that systems level MTSS district coach or district coordinator assists in monthly monthly coaches meetings to support school leadership team coaches. So at the school level, there should be a school coach, and so that district level coach could support the school level coaches. So I believe in the chat that we are going to share in the narrative, there are 2 distinct descriptions that kind of amplify what is the role of an MTSS coach or MTSS coordinator. And then the other one is, what is this role of the programs coordinator that we define in the narrative? And I think we're going to share those links in the chat so you can see very explicitly what those roles specifically look like. And so you can get a clear picture of that. One of the questions that we frequently get is, how do we fund this MTSS coordinator? So I'm going to pass it on to Stephen so that he can give us some more insight into doing that.
Thank you, Mark. And there was a question in the chat about function codes to support that. And we're going to get to that shortly. Our regional consultants were super helpful in putting that piece together. However, before we get to that level of detail, we want to think about how are we going to pay for these strategies and activities? And so, you know, we've already talked about the continuous improvement process where you've thought about the identification of those strategies, and then in the discussion around the selection of those strategies, the encouragement is during that time when you're considering the strategies that you're going to utilize, really communicating with your finance office in terms of, you know, all of the details related to what those strategies are and the cost of those, and considering the risks of not having some or any of the elements necessary to implement, so that you can have a long-term plan or even select the intervention or the innovation that you want to implement that best fits your district in terms of feasibility, capacity, and cultural fit. And a lot of that can be found and utilized through the hexagon tool, which you see a couple of steps above in that light green. So collaboration between those program leaders and your fiscal teams, which many people have already shared, happens on a weekly or a monthly. David shared a document that's really helpful to generate some of that questioning. And so that's a great start. And that was very, very encouraging to hear that folks are doing that. So all of this discussion at this point really informs the overall district budget, as you know, and the various grant applications for getting that in your consolidated app and various other pieces. So if you go to the next slide, you're going to get some of the options that exist. So we took the district-wide MTSS coordinator. So Mark was just talking about this position, and you may be able to see here that we broke it up and colored it to match the graphic that I shared earlier. And you're going to see in the dark blue some of the general fund dollars and maybe some of the activities that would be described under that. And then you'll see for section 31A at risk, there's some professional development, which is a 221, and a description there for supporting trainers. There's also Title I Part A funds that potentially could be utilized using function code 281 for system-wide program evaluation. And you'll see there a brief description, or Title II using, again, function code 221, and then title administrative duties. So you can see here, and then you'll also have access to this PowerPoint to provide some examples of how this position can be partially funded with these funding streams. And again, if you have any specific questions, because of course it relates to the specifics of your district. Your regional consultant, the 31A consultants are there to assist through this process. On the next slide, we have the programs coordinator, which is specific to the example that's in the guidance document. And again, you're going to see that we color coded, green for state funds and the orange shades for your federal funds. And again, you see 221 for professional development, 281 for the systems wide program evaluation. In this particular case, there was some family engagement pieces as it related to volunteers and working with stakeholders, and so 331, and in this particular example, it's a small district, so they utilize Title V dollars to be able to do that, and of course then administrative indirect costs, which of course is a huge discussion all by itself. So if we can go on to the next slide. Thank you, Mark. So you'll find in the guidance document, after each of the narrative, there's this section where there's an allocation summary. And so again, on this chart, you're going to see that we specifically broke down each of the topics and then put an X near the funding stream where that's a generally allowable expense, and then you'll see that asterisk there which says consult your consultant because it may be allowable depending upon your context. And so then after this section, there's a little narrative that explains again what they may or may not have, what they may have done or they've chosen in that particular situation, and explained a little bit of the reasoning behind the strategy for funding that position that's there, just to help generate some thinking. It is definitely one of multiple ways that the position could be funded, again, depending on one's context. So again, these are found on pages 25 through 27 for this particular narrative. So if you want to go right into that guidance, that will help you with some ideas and thoughts around funding these positions that are described there. And then if you would go ahead to the next slide, please, Mark. Thanks. So during today's presentation, we walked through the district narrative 1 from the fiscal guidance. Of course, if you would like any additional examples of how MTSS funds, there are 2 more. We broke it up into small, medium, and larger size districts so that we could consider the various different opportunities or challenges that a district may face based upon their size. Those opportunities are there for you, and you can see here they start on page 21 and again on page 27, and the 3rd district narrative there is on page 33. So time for reflection. If we could take a moment and share in the chat, how can your LEA or PSA utilize the fiscal guidance implementation document this year? What additional information does your LEA PSA need for allocating available funds to support MTS implementation? Or in general, what lingering questions do you have for us? If you could go ahead and place that in the chat, and of course, we'll continue to try to respond to those and provide the necessary supports or make connections for you to the people that will best be able to serve you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
So like Stephen said, this is the time. If you want to note some of those questions, what additional information does your LEA need for allocating available funds to support MTSS implementation, making a note to yourself to get in touch with your particular regional consultant and also your Section 31A person. And then any lingering questions that you might have. And please remember, there's more narratives within the document, not just the one that was showcased here. There are at least 2 more narratives. that were created by my MTSS. They did a great job in terms of the planning for the different types of LEAs that we are representing across the state of Michigan. And this is not a document we want to just sit on the shelf. We want you to take this apart with your planning teams and your program teams to be able to go through it and be able to use the document. And so I see there's a comment about clarifying limitations in 31A legislation regarding administrative costs. Hi, Sybil. That could impact fiscal planning. And so anything that's administrative, you think about leadership practices, if you think about things that the principal might do, if you think about things that an AP may be responsible for, anything that is an administrative task wouldn't be an allowability for Section 31A. And certainly with your MTSS coordinator, that is allowable in Section 31A. But we know with the person being an MTSS coordinator, myself being a practitioner of MTSS, that there are many administrative functions that an MTSS coordinator would have to be able to complete in order to be effective at doing that job. So you would have to sit down again with your program planning team and your business manager to determine how much of that function is going to be admin and how much of it you can pay from 31A. And then we still need your feedback. So again, remember I said at the beginning of our presentation that we are using the SurveyMonkey and the SurveyMonkey link and a lot of the polls to inform how we change this presentation, if we need to change the presentation, and also any kind of necessary revisions to our update on our guidance for the funding. So please take some time right now. We have a little bit of time. Open up that SurveyMonkey link and give us some information. So as we reflect on today's presentation, was the presentation clear and easy to understand? What information in the presentation did you find most helpful? And what additional information would be helpful in the presentation? And as you reflect on the guidance document, is it clear and easy to understand? And what information in the guidance is most helpful? And what additional information would be helpful in the guidance? So the infographic for coordinating funds is within the My MTSS document.
And just want to let everybody know that I did add that link to our dashboard.
And it's also within your slide. The link is in the slide too. And Jan, I see your question, but I don't have the document in front of me. How is meeting facilitation considered PD?
Yeah, it's under the MTSS Coordinator, Section 31A. It's listed as PD, is an allowable expense.
Mm-hmm.
It includes the budget item description would be support for training coaches, makes sense. So coaching professional learning. And then it says meeting facilitation with implementation specialists. I'm not sure who they are, if they're serving students or if they're supporting staff and building leadership. This meeting facilitation has always been kind of a wishy-washy thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is it administrative or is it PD? And in the past, like for PLs, like if you're doing your regular PLCs,
Mm-hmm.
districts weren't allowed to have someone facilitating those and calling it PD. The PD had to be on how to study your data. So I'm getting some questions from district leaders who are digging into this document, and I'm just wondering how to help them understand that.
Okay. If you can send it to my email, I'll have time to look at the document and then maybe coordinate with Sadie.
Okay. Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Any more questions, comments? Sarah, I think we have, is it till 10:30?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Let me double check. Is it 10:30? Let me look at the agenda. 10:30 or 10:15? It is, we're going to take a break at 10.
Okay, so we've got about 15 minutes. Yes, the survey link, the Survey Monkey, you're supposed to be able to access now. And we've given you some time to take the Survey Monkey. There's also a lot of great resources here for you, provided by my MTSS and also MDE. There's direct links to the TA Center, and also the professional learning, the technical assistance catalog is also available to you here. It's about the 5th bullet down. And also the practice profile. And don't forget your program monitoring indicators from Section 31A is also a great reflection tool. The Section 4 that we have in the program monitoring indicators, it's a great reflection tool for MTSS as we designed it. And if there's no further questions, I couldn't get the allowable uses of funds link to work. Allowable uses of funds link to work. Where is the link, Melissa?
It was in your presentation. I clicked on the presentation in the drive, and I couldn't, it just came up and it said it's not available.
Okay.
I just wondered. It
It
was near the first page in the presentation that you're on right now.
Okay. The fiscal guidance for implementing on slide 4.
It is actually under the disclaimer page, slide 5. It says generally allowable use of funds.
Okay, we're gonna have to check that one then. Okay, Liz, you
Okay.
heard that?
Thank you.
Okay. I believe.
Sorry,
you
Stephanie,
can-
one more time. Just want to make sure
on slide 5. But I believe you can find that link, the generally allowable use of funds, on the Office of Field Services page. We have one more question. How often do LEAs have program reviews for 31A? If you are in fact doing a great MTSS with quarterly reviews of data, and I don't know how many times people do fiscal reviews. Some people do it annually, and like David said earlier, planning them quarterly to do a fiscal review. If you combine your reviews for CIP, along with MTSS, it all should be encompassed together. Then you're not waiting at the end to see if your students are moving efficiently and if your investments are working in 31A for your interventions and your coaches and whomever your personnel who are employed. You're actually seeing how well things are going. If you're doing 3 times a year or you're doing it quarterly, you're actually seeing how those things are going if you institute that practice. And I would say that that is a best practice, to do it 3 to 4 times a year. And you're getting everything done at the same time. You're doing your program evaluation for 31A and Title I. That's done. And you're also seeing how well your MTSS systems are functioning. Thank you, David, for posting that. And here's our contact information for you if you should have district-specific context and questions. And then if your title person is not located here, you can still go to the Office of Field Services webpage to be able to locate your person.
We greatly appreciate your feedback through the SurveyMonkey. As Stephanie mentioned, these pieces are being compiled to inform further guidance. On behalf of the MDE, we look forward to supporting you in any way we can. We really realize that there are numerous funding streams and probably the greatest amount of funds we've ever seen with when we add in the ESSER and ARP funds over this next couple years. So if there are additional ways that you see we can support, feel free to add that to the SurveyMonkey as well.